Welcome to the Act Church podcast. Glad you're with us today. Today it is me, Hunter Croft, along with Kristen Wire.
Hello.
It's just the millennials. Last week was the millennials and me. This week we are the millennials.
Yes.
There's no one else. And today we are going to talk about joy and gladness in God despite suffering in our lives. I think a lot of times people think that joy is something for when things are going well, but I think that's happiness. I've drawn a distinction between happiness and joy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and get into some of that. David preached on Acts chapter 16, verses about 22 through 25. I don't remember the exact verses. You can look on our Vimeo page to see that sermon. And so he talked about contentment despite circumstances. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So this week we did a little triple date.
Yes, it was fun.
Yeah, it was me and my wife Taylor and
me and my boyfriend, other Hunter, or Chewbacca.
A different Hunter.
He's very hairy, and people think that he looks like Chewbacca.
A little bit. You can, yes. Just trust us.
Yeah.
And then my sister-in-law and her boyfriend all came with us. Funny story. So my sister-in-law's boyfriend was my little brother's, one of his good friends growing up. And it's just funny because so I grew up in Spokane and he grew up in Spokane. And I met this girl in Portland and we started dating. And then like 3 years later, her little sister met a guy from Spokane and they started dating. So now I hang out with my little brother's old friend as he's not my brother-in-law, but he's my sister-in-law's boyfriend. Yeah. So that's funny.
Spokane's a small world, huh?
I guess so.
I don't know. I've never been there. I know nothing
it's
about it.
It's bigger than Vancouver.
Oh, okay.
Actually. But it feels smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we went to a basketball game, an NBA game. Saw the Blazers playing.
The Mavericks.
Yes.
Shout out Dallas. Me and Hunter, we moved to Washington from Dallas,
yes.
I want to say like 2.5 years ago. So we went because to rep our Dallas team,
yes.
Even though we didn't have any of their memorabilia, we just went in regular clothes. We still cheered for them.
Yes. And it didn't do any good. So
no, they lost. They lost a lot.
Which we know we were, of course, Taylor and I were, of course, rooting for the Trailblazers, but secretly we kind of rooted for Dallas because we wanted to see a good game, and we didn't. Which they kind of closed in a little bit.
The second half was better than the first half, for sure.
But yeah, it was a good time. What did you think of your first? This wasn't your first NBA playing.
It was like my
game.
second. Yeah. It was fun. So my first one, it was a Mavs game. I don't even remember who they were playing, but it was probably like 3.5 years ago when I saw that game. I don't even remember if they won, but it was a fun experience. This was more fun though because of the people I was with. I felt like it was really good community and bonding with you guys, and it's really nice to have more people my age in the church. I mean, there's definitely a couple, but since you guys have started coming, it's brought like a bigger group of millennials, I guess. And
we doubled the size of the millennial population.
You really
church,
did. You really did, which in my opinion, has definitely been a blessing. And so it was fun to hang out with you guys and get to know you guys better. And yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. I don't know if you got this vibe at all. I kind of felt bad because I was so tired that night. Well, and also knowing, so this was Saturday night that we went. So we had church the next morning. So my mind's already kind of getting frazzled by all of it. Just there's a lot of details that go into
Sunday morning.
So I was a little just like pre-tired for that. And then also I had worked just a bunch that day and the day before that. So I was a little sleepy at the game.
And see, I was a little bit off my rocker because I was really excited to hang out with you guys and felt like I had, like me and Hunter were like, oh, we haven't hung out with people in like so long. So I was like really excited to like have all this social interaction and was like really hyper. Yeah. And so I was kind of like off my rocker, but I could sense that like you were really tired and chill. So I was trying to hold back, but I was like, blah.
I think I was just about. I clapped whenever a good play happened, but besides that, I might as well have been watching on a TV screen. So I was just kind of. I think I literally was leaning my face on my hand the entire game, just watching, just kind of zoned out. And I mean, I enjoyed the game. I didn't not enjoy it, but I was not
focused.
I was not energetic.
Yeah, I get that.
With that. So we'll have to go to another game sometime.
That would be fun.
All right, so the topic that we were talking about is having. Well, let me read to you the passage. I'll give you a little context. This is out of Acts 16, starting in verse 22, we're dealing with Paul and Silas, and they are in. Oh, where are they? They're in a town, and basically this girl who is possessed by a demon, which is causing her to babble and basically give prophecies, and making her owners. She's a slave to these owners who are using her for that demonic possession and prophecy to make money. People come to them and give them money, and they'll send them to her so that she can make them. Or she'll make prophecies and make them money. And so she's following around Paul and Silas and just annoying the heck out of them. What does it say? She says, these men are Jews and they are... Oh, no. I'm reading the wrong spot. She is following them around and crying out, these men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation. And this sounds like a positive thing, but I think it was more of a mocking tone. You can watch the sermon if you go back a couple sermons in our Vimeo page.
Or on our website.
Yes, on our own website. We've got them all up there if you look under our Acts series. And so... what Paul does is he ends up casting the demon out of her. So no longer she's no longer able to prophesy, which of course makes her owners mad because now they have lost all of their profits. David said that in the sermon, and I don't know if he meant to do the double play because they lost their money and they lost their prophetess. So I like
He's
that.
not one much on puns, so maybe he didn't do it on purpose, but I think it's funny.
That's a wordplay though.
Okay.
I'm gonna differentiate that from a pun.
All right, whatever.
I don't know if there's a difference. And so yes, they are upset, of course, and they rile up a crowd and they throw Paul and Silas in jail. And so, starting in verse 22, I'll read. The crowd joined in, attacking them, and the magistrates tore the garments off them and gave orders to beat them with rods. And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into the prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. Having received this order, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. And that's where we're going to stop for today. David preached on what happened after that just this last Sunday, so you can look at that sermon as well to see the follow-up on that story. So all that passage kind of points out and is kind of clearly showing how backwards it was that Paul and Silas get thrown into jail. And their response is to go praise God while they're in jail. And
naked
so often,
and beat up and bruised and bloody and just not sounding like they're having a great day.
And I know I do this. I kind of cartoonize the Bible because it's something I've been hearing since I was a kid. So when I'm watching cartoons and I hear a Bible story, I kind of cartoonize it in my head. And that's kind of how a lot of these stories have stuck. But if you think about it, I mean, these guys were, if you think about a homeless person who is living just in really rough circumstances, and imagine somebody comes along and beats him up and puts him in jail. That's probably what Paul and Silas looked like at this point. They had been traveling a lot.
Mm-hmm. They're dirty.
Yes.
And smelly.
Yes. It's not just like they're in some nice plastic toy jail.
Right. They're probably like in a den, something like that. Not like jail that we have these days, but like.
And here they are. They're praising God, and it's a shame that that's not our reaction when similar situation. Not that we've ever had a similar. I don't. If you have had a similar situation to this, I want you to come talk to us on this podcast because that sounds like a really interesting story. So let us know if that's you've been in that situation, and it happens. There have been stories of this happening. Not in America, really, but
there's a lot of missionaries, I think.
Yes, it happens where you're in a country, especially in Muslim countries, that it's illegal to be doing anything gospel related.
Yeah.
Maybe in China too. And so, aside from those, we're not. I mean, what would you say is the most severe persecution you have encountered for your faith?
Nothing like that. Nothing that extreme. Probably the biggest persecution that I've gotten was probably when I was in university, just like snide comments, like, and sarcastic, condescending comments, like, oh, you grew up in the Bible Belt, so you know what's going on, and you know everything that's, and like, you're intelligent, which, whatever, I'm not even gonna.
Like that was a sarcastic statement.
Yeah,
right?
like
Yes.
they just like kind of discredit what I have to say and take it as not important because I'm small and narrow-minded and I believe in Jesus Christ, which is such an awful thing, which is what they make it sound like, but it's not.
Yeah. So yeah, there's, and that's like that's sort of a social persecution. I would
And
call
that's
that.
not even like a physical, like I've never been beaten up for my faith or anything like that. It's really just social judgment. But it's funny because it's still scarring enough for you to like, it's still scarring because you like later have like a hesitation about like sharing a gospel.
It causes you to recoil.
Yeah, it really does. And like rethink and be like, oh, should I really share this in this moment or am I going to look stupid? And like the enemy definitely gets in your head and uses it next time you're wanting to speak about the gospel or say anything about God. Like, oh, remember what happened last time you did that? Like you sounded like an idiot, which is all lies of the enemy and it's just stupid. But like he definitely uses it.
We're made to want to be liked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't want to be liked, there's something wrong with you. So, if you're dealing with that same situation, don't think there's anything wrong with you because you're afraid to do something that might incur some judgment from people around you. But also be glad that judgment is not in the form of a beating in jail.
For sure. I've been very blessed that my harshest persecution has been social.
And for me
and not
personally,
physical.
so I went to a Bible college. And so I didn't get a whole lot of persecution for my faith there. And the college or the high school I went to, it was a public school in Spokane. And I don't remember ever really feeling any type of judgment. I went to, we had a FCA meeting on like Friday mornings. That was Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And, there would be different teachers coming in to talk at that. And it was run by teachers. And so there was just a lot of people of faith in my school, just kind of inadvertently, that just happened to all be at this school. And there were for sure teachers who were atheist. But they were all none of them were the token bitter atheist who's just angry at Christians. They were all very reasonable atheists. I would say they were all very willing to encounter people who are Christians. And so I don't think I ever had any type of persecution. The greatest persecution I probably had was, I don't know, from friends who used to come to youth group with me who stopped coming to youth group because they were busy with other things. And that's not persecution. That's people growing apart and prioritizing things differently. So, reading this passage, it's like, whoa, that is not my scenario. So is there anything that we can gain from this passage is kind of the question that we were discussing what we're going to talk about in this podcast.
Yeah.
And we're going, well, we've really had fairly easy lives as far as
been very
the world
blessed.
goes.
Yeah.
Yes. We don't have a lot of suffering, but and so I'm sure that we're probably much weaker in this area than many others.
And we're still super young. So like, I feel like the longer life goes on, like the more suffering circumstances you encounter and like, more people die and you suffer from loss and bereavement. And I've been very fortunate in my life to where I've had a couple of grandparents pass, but like that was when I was younger, and it's not like I've just been very blessed that like death is not something that I've had to go through and I had to experience. And for that, I'm very thankful. But like, again, it's just, I feel very fortunate and very blessed in my life that I have not had a lot of these circumstances where I've been beaten or abused or neglected, And so me and Hunter were both like, well, what do we talk about? Like, we know that we've suffered, but like in perspective of a lot of people and even in this scripture and in this passage, like we have been very blessed and God has protected us and been good to us. I mean, God's good to everyone, but like in this circumstance particularly that we just haven't had any of these struggles. And so it was it's kind of like, oh, what do we talk about?
And if you're in a similar situation as us, that's not to discredit you in any way.
No.
you still, it's not to discredit your struggles, because, we know, obviously, I still have struggles. They're just not quite as severe, I suppose. Yeah. And so that's what we want to talk about, is how do we have joy and contentment despite whatever circumstances. I think the key idea is, regardless of good or bad, to be content in God. And I think that's something that I probably have struggled with, in part because I have not had to deal with any significant problems in my life. It's almost given me an entitlement, which that's a word for us millennials.
A millennial word.
Yeah. But I think in a way it has given me a sense of entitlement that I don't have to feel joy and contentment unless I'm happy. The thing about happiness is that things can be great and you cannot be happy. Things can be terrible and you can be happy. Well, so I'm going to call that joy.
Yeah.
If things are terrible and you are still managing to find gladness in your heart, I'm going to call that joy. Joy is something that pervades your circumstances. Happiness is something that comes because of circumstances, but happiness can not come even when your circumstances are good, which can probably be evidenced by any time I've not been happy in my life.
Right. And I'm going to also put a spin on it from saying that happiness can come from very materialistic things. Like happiness can come from relationships. It can come from material things. It can come from our circumstances in life. But really, in my opinion and in my experience, joy only comes from the Lord and having a relationship with the Lord and having hope. Like, it sounds so cliche, but like, I really do feel like joy and hope, like, they are together, like there's no point in having joy if you don't feel hope, if you don't see the possibility of hope. And that's where I think like it, and again, I'm only speaking from my experience. I can't say that people out there haven't experienced joy who don't like love and believe in Jesus, but I just think that like Jesus is the anchor of joy, and having a relationship with him is where you find your joy. And so in my opinion, that's kind of the difference between happiness and joy.
Yeah. So the joy is something that is not dependent on whatever circumstances.
Right. It's deeply rooted. It's like something in the heart, something profound.
Yes. The world can beat you up for casting the demon out of their prophet. The world can
and send you to prison.
Yeah. And send you to prison. The world can do all these things, but that does not change who God is and what he has done for your life. You can't go back and take Jesus off the cross. You can't go back and convince Jesus not to die for our sins. You can't go and somehow put me in a category that God does not love or anything like that. We're secure in that, and I think that's what a lot of people who struggle with a lack of contentment, especially if you're a Christian, and I'm not speaking to you as if I'm somehow better in this. I'm saying, I as a Christian, when I'm feeling that discontentment that so often I do, it's usually because I am taking for granted that ongoing commitment from God, that he loves and has done all this for me. And so when I'm feeling discontent, it means that I have somehow missed the mark on what I should be focusing on.
Right. And I think also discontentment comes with like, oh, I'm not getting my way. Like, I don't have what I want. Like, things aren't going the way I planned them in my head. Like, for instance, you would have asked me 2 years ago where I would be right now, and it would not be working at Acts Church doing podcasts about being content in life. 2 years ago, I thought I was going to be going to grad school, pursuing my education, getting my PhD, because education was something I really honestly idled and like overly valued in my life. And, but even though that's not where I am right now, and even though education is still really important to me, I'm content with where I am. Like, even though I would have never imagined that I was going to work at a church and be heading up a children's ministry, it's a scary job. It's a big job. And I had a lot of fear taking it on and going into it. But God has taught me to be content in that and to find joy in that. No, it's not the way I wanted it to go. No, I'm not where I want to be. And, sometimes the enemy likes to throw that back in my face. But I think it's really joy and contentment that I find in Christ, knowing that I'm doing what he wants me to be doing, and I'm doing what he has planned for me, and I'm being obedient, and I'm listening, and so I'm thankful for that, and I rejoice in that, and I do find contentment and joy in that.
Yes, it's that worldly view of what success is.
Exactly.
That can sometimes undermine our contentment in Christ.
For sure.
I'm in a somewhat similar situation. It's not very similar, but the timing and stuff is similar. So my wife and I, we live with her parents, and if you asked me 2 years ago if I would be living with my in-laws, I mean, there's nothing against my in-laws at all, but it's just not. It's not what I had pictured for my life. I imagined, 4.5 years ago, I moved out of my parents' house, and had no real intent. I mean, at that point, I did move in with my parents for like a month that next summer. But I had no intention of ending up living with my parents or my wife's parents. And so I can get really discontent in that. And something deeper in my life that I've noticed a pattern of is this always looking to whatever the next big thing is, from about the time I started middle school, it was always graduation from high school. You just wanted to get out of school, wanted to get out into the real world. Everything was a waste of your time. And that's how I saw it. And I don't think that's unique to me, but, and then it was, when I got to college, it was, getting married and graduating college. It was, I wanted that next, the grass was going to be greener on the other side of that. And, marriage has been great. It is, the grass is greener, and graduating college has been great. And, these are all good things that I was looking forward to, but if they undermine your contentment in the moment, that's where I think it becomes sinful and harmful to your process.
Right.
If you were born, graduated from college, and married, that process is what you're missing all the value in that. And I think to an extent, I missed out on some of the things that high school and college and singleness had for me, because I was so fixated on those things in the future. And that's something that I see myself battling now as I'm waiting to get my own place to live with my wife. I see that as a similar thing where I am too focused on what is ahead, that I'm sabotaging myself in the time in between, and I'm not relying on God for my contentment. I'm all of a sudden my joy is dependent on my circumstances instead of being dependent on what God has done for me. And so that's something that I am having to repeatedly remind myself of, and I think that we all should be reminding ourselves of, is that we do not get our contentment from our circumstances, but from who God is.
Yeah. Psalm 113 talks about suffering, and, David talking about, he's just really honest and vulnerable with God.
Know. Our pastor wrote Psalms.
Oh, not that David.
Oh, different David. Okay.
Different David. Yeah. So that's why I really admire the Psalms, is I feel like, sometimes prayer can get so watered down and so artificial and so, or just something that we do when someone's struggling or when you're struggling, but I read the Psalms and I see how vulnerable and honest David is with the Lord. And, he just says, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long must I be sorrowful in my soul? Like, why are you doing this? He's not afraid to question God, which is just like amazing to me, because growing up in the church, you're always told like God has a reason, God has a plan, don't question what he does, just have faith.
Yeah.
But that's so unnatural. I think it's part of us as humans. We long and we want to know why, and we want to understand,
We're probably going to be fake if that's our reaction.
Right. And so David is just so honest and vulnerable with God. And, he's just, and when he prays in Psalm 13, he says, "Consider and answer me, O Lord my God, enlighten my eyes." And that for me is just like, he's so direct with God. Like, he's asking him for something really specific. Like, just give me an answer. He's not like, oh, God, whatever's in your will, whatever you want. Like, he's very specific with what he wants God to do and God to show him. And that's just so inspiring to me, because you can be, I need a reminder of how to be real with God and how to be honest with God and how to show him my emotions and be honest with him. And David's not afraid to tell God, like, hey, I'm hurting, I'm suffering, I'm struggling, like, help me, teach me, answer me. Like, I need an answer, And at the end of Psalm 13, David really does what we're talking about today, and that's finding contentment and joy in the Lord. Psalm 13:5, I have trusted in your loving kindness. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. And so just 4 verses ago, David was saying, like, why? Like, kind of being super dramatic, which I relate to because I'm really dramatic. Just like, how long must I suffer and be sorrowful in my heart? But at the very end, he goes, but I still trust you and I still love you because you are so good and you're merciful and you're faithful. And I know that even though I'm suffering right now, I'm going to sing and praise to you because you're still merciful and you've dealt bountifully with me. You've still been gracious to me. You still love me despite how I'm feeling and how crazy I'm feeling and how out of control everything is. And even though this is not where I want to be, I still trust that you can provide. And I know that a lot of Christians say this kind of stuff all the time, like, oh, the Lord will provide, don't worry, don't be stressed about it. But for me, there's a head knowledge of saying that, like the cliche way of saying that. And then there's just knowing it in your heart, where I feel like the real joy and contentment comes from, is really understanding and trusting that God's got you where you're supposed to be. And yeah, you're hurting and things are suffering and things are hard and this is not the way you planned it. But God has purpose, and he's still merciful to you, and he still loves you, and he's not going to abandon you, and he's still got you. And so anytime I find myself whirling and sorrowful and overwhelmed and stressed, I really just go back and read the Psalms and admire how honest David is with the Lord, and go before the Lord in prayer and try and be just as honest as he is and ask for God's help, and just remind myself of his faithfulness. And so that's something that I've just recently have really started clinging on to in my adult life. I don't think I had this faith when I was 15, because like you said, you're concerned with the things of the future. I think that's just something that, again, doesn't only plague you, but plagues other people our age and probably even adults of, okay, I have this, but I want to be here. I want to be better. I want to set this. Thing. Yeah, I want to set this expectation. But just remember that God will meet you where you are, regardless of where you are. If you're in the pit with the lions, or if you're on a mountaintop rejoicing, he's going to meet you there, and he's going to provide you with what you need. And it's you've got to rejoice in that and be content in that. And that's always a lot easier said than done. Yes. For sure.
And I think it's a path that we have to walk. Like that passage shows, it started out with David didn't just go, he didn't internally go, oh, life sucks. Hey, God, I love you. Everything's great.
Exactly.
He wasn't putting up this face for God. He wasn't putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse.
Hey, you said it right this time. No,
I didn't. I purposely said it wrong.
The second time you did.
If you heard our last podcast, I mistakenly said the horse before the cart, which is what you're supposed to do. But so often we put the cart before the horse, because we what we do is we try to fake, oh no, everything's good, God, everything's good, I don't have a problem with you, like it's a boss that we're upset at.
We tiptoe around it.
Yes. God's not, I don't know if it's because we think God's not able to handle our issues, or if because I think we just think that we're not supposed to, God's supposed to be good. So why would we ever be bad, or why would we ever be mad at him and have an issue with what he's doing? And so it's this path that I think I try to walk whenever I am especially upset about something, or just having a rough week on. I try to walk this path where I go, where I'm in that place, and I am willing to rejoice in God anyway. I'm willing to go before God and say, hey, I guess you know that this is not how I want my week to be going right now. Why? I don't know why this is like this. I'm pretty upset about it. I know that you want the best for me, but I don't understand this, and I'm ticked off about it. But and usually after I admit all that to God, there's like a peace that kind of washes over me, and suddenly it's like all the whatever the circumstances are, all those things are kind of fogging up my life, and I'm not seeing things clearly. And all of a sudden when I do that and I can just be real with God and say, God, these are my issues, take them away, please. The issues don't go away, but suddenly I am able to see through them. I'm able
and
to
you're
see
not
beyond them.
shouldering them.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a path that I try to, because so often in my life, something gets me down and it turns into a 2-week long down spiral of being fake to God, being in leadership of the church. You have 2-3 weekly appointments where you have to appear as though you are, in love with God, you have to, that it's like you expect
that you are a good, strong leader and you have your stuff together and you can do it. Yeah.
There are multiple times in a week where you're kind of expected to be like that, or at least you expect that of yourself.
For sure. And I think that's like what church, at least old church culture, especially us growing up in the church, has put on us, and like what we have grown up seeing.
Yes. And I do think as leaders, we should be quicker to get to that place when these things get in our way. But so often so I have some sort of issue in my life and it's really got me down, and I just ignore the fact that happened, and I show up to church or something and I just act like everything's good between me and God. I don't have any issues, and it does not help. That does not help me get over it. An hour afterwards, I am back in a pit, just digging myself deeper, and being upset about whatever it was. Whereas if I had gone to God and said, hey, God, I don't know the solution to this. I don't think that there is. Maybe there's just no immediate solution. But I want to worship you anyway. I want to spend time with you this morning at church or something like that. I want to be fully present with you, despite these awful circumstances, however awful they may be. That is what's going to make our worship authentic. And I think that, in a way, I think that these difficult things in our lives can launch us into more authentic worship,
and relationship.
Yes, yeah, they can. I talked about this in the orientation class that we did in the Devo. I only did one Devo, and in it I talked about worship, being the worship leader here at Acts Church. I talked about how when your circumstances in life are down like that, whether it's something really serious like a death in the family or some sort of big issue, or whether it's just, I didn't like this conversation I had with this person, I'm kind of feeling unsure about where I'm at with them now, and something like that. Whether it's one of those two things, if you're willing to humble yourself before God in that moment, you've already taken care of the first step of worship, and that is humbling yourself before God and seeing that relationship as it is. And then you get the joy of being able to just be in relationship with God and spend time with Him during our 2 hours of worship on Sunday morning, or hopefully, that goes beyond just Sunday morning.
Right. It's your life.
You're worshiping through your life. And you just can't do that without first accepting this thing that you're holding on to.
Right. Accepting your unideal circumstances, whatever they may be.
Yeah. And so that's I think, being the worship leader here, that's kind of how I'm always seeing how things can relate to worship. And that's how I see this contentment, despite whatever circumstances you're in. I mean, sometimes for me, I don't know if this is true for you, sometimes great circumstances for me will also detract from my worship of God and my contentment, because maybe it's, I got this new, for me, it's camera. I got a new camera and all of a sudden I'm getting my contentment from that camera. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with getting new toys or something like that you can get enjoyment from. But as soon as you start getting contentment from that, you're going to use up all the contentment that you can get out of that thing pretty quick. If Christmas in my childhood ever taught me anything, is that the enjoyment of the toys usually only lasts about a month.
Yeah. And then it's like, I want a new one. Yeah.
The very best toy I ever got, I probably was really into for a month. And then I probably kind of gave up on it after a while. And so, or at least the contentment that maybe I still used it, but the contentment that brought, that I allowed that to give me that the way that I allowed that thing to give me contentment in my life has dwindled, and I'm left feeling empty again. Yeah. And that's the danger of good circumstances in life, is that we are getting our contentment from those things, and then all of a sudden those things aren't giving us contentment anymore. So we're looking for the next thing. And man, if I fall into that, I'm becoming more and more materialistic, because you're looking for material things to give you that contentment, that they're just stuff. It's not going to be able to give you lasting joy in the Lord.
For me, I do definitely struggle with that. It's not, my contentment isn't found in material objects like cameras or Christmas gifts or whatever. I tend to find my contentment in people and relationships with people, whether that be my relationship with my boyfriend, my friendships with my friends, my relationship with my boss, with my mom, with my family. I put all of my eggs in that one basket, and really, like, that's where I find my joy. Oh, my mom's proud of me, like, I did good. Or I did this, and this in my job. I'm successful. My boss is proud of me. Like, go me. I'm doing great. I'm on fire. I'm awesome. Which is like all pride, because God doesn't, or I don't do those things. God does. And so for me, I definitely find my contentment in relationships, instead of thanking God for those relationships and asking him to use me in those relationships, to show people his love or whatever. I really those are my relationships. This is what I get from this relationship, and I need to do this in return for this relationship, and that will make me feel good, or that will make me feel bad. And it just, like, people make really crummy idols like that. Relationships make really crummy idols, because whether the expectations are all on you to fulfill those circumstances or someone else, that's just a lot of responsibility to put on one person. Yes. And that's a lot of stuff to put on one person, whether it be your spouse, your significant other, your friends, your mom, your daughter, your kids, whatever that is. Like, people are going to let you down. People aren't perfect, and so I find myself more and more every day, as I'm getting closer with Lord, wanting the Lord to be all those things for me. I want him to be my best friend. I want him to be the ultimate relationship and confidant and mentor and discipler. And I want to find my delight and my joy in the Bible, and not the advice I get from my friends or what this person tells me or this or this. And I want God to be proud of the works that I'm doing for his kingdom. And I want that to be more important than what my mom thinks of me or what my boss thinks of me. And I think it's so easy to, when you use relationships as an idol and to fill those contentments in your heart, it's so easy to get drained and then be like, oh, I'm a terrible person. Like, I wasn't there for that friend. I didn't help them do this. Or I'm a terrible daughter because I didn't meet this expectation. It can flip-flop so easily. Like you said, probably even shorter than a month than it would be with a camera. One day you can be the best friend ever, and the next day you can feel terrible because you didn't answer your phone and your friend was going through a crisis.
One statement, one statement you should have said.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be so easy. And so for me, I definitely think I find my joy and my happiness in personal relationships. Now, while I think God can redeem that and use my gifts and my love for personal relationships to bring others closer to him and bring me closer to him, I think that I needed to learn that people make crummy idols, and that I can't get your contentment from they them. Can't be gods, yes. And I can't be perfect, and that God still, like I said earlier, God still loves me, and he wants to meet me where I'm at and comfort me and be my healer and provide for me and give me joy. Because there's no personal friendship, boyfriend relationship, family relationship that I've ever had that's brought me as much joy as following Christ and loving Christ and worshiping Christ. And that's why, again, like I said, I think Christ brings so much joy into people's lives.
So I'd like to just pray about this, if you'll pray with me. God, thank you for this medium that we can use to discuss things to bring us closer to what you have for our lives. I thank you for the contentment that we can have in you, for your consistency and your love for us that is not dependent on our circumstances or how we are behaving, but that it just transcends all of that. And so I want to pray for all those who are listening to this right now, who may be dealing with issues in their lives. Maybe they're really significant, or maybe they're not all that big. I just pray that you would give them contentment and joy in you, and that they would press into you and take whatever they have, whatever they're holding on to, and just give it to you, and that they would pray right now and just spend some time with you, worshiping you, despite whatever circumstances are in their life. And the same goes for those who are happy with where they are, who are really enjoying the circumstances in their life. I pray that they would not let that overshadow your superiority to whatever circumstance they are in, that you would be at the center of their lives, and that you would be just this unwavering rock that will not leave whenever these circumstances change, but that you would be more and more apparent to them in their lives. We thank you for all that you are for us, and just pray that you would continue to draw us closer to you. And pray those things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to that podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It was good talking to Kristen about all those things. I think that, at least, I don't know if you got a lot out of it, but I got a lot out of this conversation. So thanks for listening. I hope that it was as meaningful for you. If you haven't heard of us before, we are Acts Church. We're located in Camas, Washington. You can check us out at actscamas.org. We'd love it if you could subscribe to this channel, whether you're listening to it on iTunes or SoundCloud. Give it a review, give it a like, give it a comment. Anything to kind of show us how this is impacting you, so that we can continue providing podcasts that are meaningful to you. We don't want to this would be great, I guess, if we could just have our own discussions here and put them out there and just get it for ourselves. But we want it to be something that also ministers to you, whether you're part of our church or not. Speaking of which, if you're not part of our church, we would totally recommend that you find a church near you that is teaching the Bible and is healthy and can help you grow to be stronger in Christ. And you can't just do that through podcasts and through listening to sermons. It has to be something that is done in a relationship with other Christians. So we'd encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you again next week.